everyone for coming. We sure appreciate coming out tonight on this cold night. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not quite ready for this cold weather. So I guess we're going to have to get ready, get used to it. My name is Carla Alley, and I'm president of the Mason County Republican Women. And also Catherine Bentley is in the back, and Melinda Guthrie is working on the reception. I just thought I'd let you kind of know who we are and what we do. For those of you who don't know about us, we have a group of about 70 women and men within Mason County that work on supporting our candidates, getting all of the information that we can about ballot initiatives, and supporting our community, our county, and our state and federal government. So we are very involved. We meet every Monday, not every Monday, the first Monday of every month. Thank you. I don't want to have too many meetings, but we typically meet at the Grand Vista Hotel from 11:30 on the first Monday of every month. This month is a little bit different in that we're having a Christmas social on Friday from 11:30 to 1. And we're having the Sound Sensations from Central High School actually singing for us, and we're having hors d'oeuvres and drinks within the area from 11:30 to 1. So that's kind of where we are to be celebrating the year and everything that has been accomplished this year. What the Republican women believe, basically, the strength of our nation lies with the individual, in that each person's dignity, freedom, ability, and responsibility must be honored. Equal rights, equal justice, and equal opportunity for all, regardless of race, creed, age, sex, national origin, or disability. Americans must retain the principles that have made us strong while developing new and innovative ideas to meet the challenges of changing times. The Republican Party is the best vehicle for translating these ideas into positive and successful principles of government. So that's just kind of an idea of who we are and what we do. And that's one of the reasons that we want to make sure that we introduce everything that we're doing. In January, we're going to be welcoming the headmaster of the Ascent Classical Academy Charter School. She'll speak about the classical education that's truly kind of emphasizes the Republican principles. And so she'll be speaking at our January meeting at the Grand Vista. It just encourages kids to become, when they pursue higher education, the trades, military service, are engaged in responsible citizenship. So we really try to push that quite a bit. We are working quite a bit with the TPUSA at CMU University to make sure that we can help support them. And in one of our leadership meetings that we're having tonight, I really do want to thank our district attorney, Dan Rubenstein, for speaking tonight. So he's the district attorney for Colorado's 21st Judicial District. As the county's chief prosecutor, Dan leads the office responsible for holding offenders accountable, protecting victims, and ensuring justice is served fairly and consistently. And I don't know if you want to give a little overview of your office. That would be wonderful, Dan. We'd sure appreciate it. And then we'll be holding a question and answer in a little bit, and so I'll be passing the microphone around. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Dan Rubenstein. I'm the DA for the 21st Judicial District. Most people will refer to me as the DA of Mesa County. We are actually a one-county district, but technically I'm the 21st Judicial District of the state of Colorado. So I put it up there for both. So either one interchangeably is just fine. I like to start off every presentation by saying that I have the greatest job in the world. I am elected by all of you to represent you, to go into court and do what I think you want me to do. And I don't take a straw poll every time I make a decision. So I try to do as many of these things as possible so that I can hear back from you as to whether or not you think the priorities that we are focused on are the things you want us to be focused on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about two of our programs. That I had them list off the program tonight to be from low-risk offenders to high-risk offenders and how we treat them differently. Because as it turns out, you really want to treat them quite differently because of the response of what the criminal justice system will do to people. So what is it that I do? I prosecute cases, or sometimes I decide not to prosecute cases, and we're going to talk about my diversion program, juvenile diversion specifically, a little bit more today. But I decide which cases to prosecute, what offers to make, which cases to push to trial. After we do trials, I talk to jurors to find out if they think that was a good use of taxpayer funds for that to be a case. Now, we don't, of course, get the decision ultimately as to whether or not somebody goes to trial, but our offers often dictate whether or not somebody goes to trial. But ultimately, it's a defendant's right to decide whether or not they want to take a case to trial versus plead guilty or not guilty. Public safety is a team sport. Anybody who works in my office will hear me say that very, very often. And I actually have several people who work in my office. Tirsa in the purple shirt, raise your hand, Tirsa. Everybody from Tirsa on over to Jasmine against the wall is actually part of my office in different roles. But they hear me say public safety is a team sport very often, because it really is. We work with the community. Community is our witnesses. We work with law enforcement. They're the ones who investigate the cases and meet with us about charging the cases and figuring out what to charge. They then are contacted about what the offer should be and make sure they're okay with it. And oftentimes, if we go to trial, they're sitting right next to us as our advisory witness. They testify at the trial. And then, of course, our partnership with the community, because a jury trial, of course, is a jury of 12, 6 for a misdemeanor and 12 for a felony of community members. So it really is something that involves every part of our community in order to have justice served. I became the DA in 2015. This is what I look like today, but I started in the office in 1996. So I have been doing this for a while, and that was looks like a mugshot, because back when we used to get our county badges, I think they might still do this, but it's the mugshot system that they take our pictures on. So that was what my badge access looked like in 1996. We didn't have badge access actually in 1996. You had to punch in a little code in the door because they hadn't invented those little prox cards yet. This is my office. We have currently 89 authorized positions. Almost all of them are currently full. So you can see me up at the top of this. Then I have my assistant DA is named Jeremy Savage. I will often refer to him as the person in charge of all things lawyer. So he actually is in charge of the investigators as well. But Jeremy has Michael Fisher, who's currently the chief deputy over the lower level felony prosecutors. Mike Perry is the chief deputy over the county court prosecutors. Melinda Shisham is the chief deputy over the senior trial deputies, who handle the sex assault on child cases, the residential burglaries, attempted murders, things like that. Tirsa, raise your hand again. Tirsa is my chief deputy over the drug division and the juvenile division. And then Jeremy supervises that along with James Cannon, who's my chief investigator. And then on the other side of the org chart is Trish Watson. She's my director of support services, and I will often refer to as my second in command over all things not lawyer. So she has the secretary supervisor, the paralegal supervisor, the director of victim services, which has a lot of different types of services. And Sheena is our secretary or our supervisor over the clerks who open our cases, open the files, get everything moving. And then this is our budget manager, who sadly, after being with me since 2003, is retiring in a week. Yeah. So in any event, it's a big office to run with a lot of different things, and I'm going to talk just about a couple of programs that we do today, but I'll open it up for questions afterwards. So let's talk about reducing system involvement for low-risk offenders. First, let me tell you the story. So in 2007, my wife became a magistrate. Because of my role in the DA's office, she couldn't handle the juvenile criminal cases, so she did post-decree divorce work, but she also handled the truancy docket. Truancy is when you're persistently missing school. They can decide how they want to handle it, but one of the options is to send people to court. And she used to tell me, you're getting your juvenile diversion kids 2 years too late. If you want to get people and get them so that they're not committing crimes, don't wait until they've already started committing crimes and you finally catch them. Try to get them before they commit crimes. And usually that's about 2 years before when they start skipping school. So I would tell her, that's not really my job. My job as the DA is when somebody commits a crime, I decide what to do about it. And so during COVID, so for 12 years, she was doing that as one of the magistrates doing the truancy docket. And then she retired from that. 5 years later, it's now the pandemic, and it's June of 2020, and we're up on Palisade Rim Trail doing our hike, and she says to me the same thing. You know, you're getting your juvenile diversion kids 2 years too late. I said, okay, what would this look like? What are you talking about? She's like, why don't you get a hold of the school district? Well, at the time, Trish Mayer, who was my chief deputy over the juvenile division, was also on the school board. She said, why don't you contact the school board and find out whether or not they're interested in having you run their diversion, you run their truancy as a diversion. And I'm like, okay, that's actually not a terrible idea. Let me think this through. And I thought, well, it's not in my job description to deal with people who haven't committed a crime, but I don't know why anybody would complain. It is in my job description to try to keep the community safe, and if stopping people from getting to the point where they're committing crimes is keeping the community safe, I think I can just rewrite the job description. So first thing I did was I called her and I said, look, Trish, do you think the school board would be at all interested? She said, I don't know, I'll check. She calls me back about a week later and says, we're not only interested in you running the truancy program, we're interested in you running the suspension and expulsion program. So my next call was to Tim Foster, who was supposed to retire in April of 2020. And then in March of 2020, the pandemic happened, so he got held over for about a year. So I called Tim and John Marshall, and I said, look, I am not the age person that's going to connect to a kid that's starting to miss school. I need near-peer mentors. What do you think about CMU doing something like having 24 hours of community service where we'll encourage them to be like a senior partner to these kids? And we can locate near campus. We can try to figure out a way to do this. And he said, I got one better for you. We have federal work study dollars, and our engagement in school, our chance of getting somebody to graduation goes up if they do some work study where they're actually working in the field they want to go into. So he said, we'll do it. So at the time I was trying to get the city to build the rec center at Lincoln Park. That fell apart. And finally, Derek Wagner and John Marshall called me up and said, look, let's just get this program going. I'll find a place for you on campus. So I called Jackie Berry. Jackie, come on up. She's going to help me out with this part of the presentation. So I called Jackie Berry, who is working at the time at Division of Youth Services as the director of Division of Youth Services, Kitty Jail at Juvie. And I said, look, can you come run this program for me? Here's my idea. I want to have our diversion program run at the same time as our other program for people who didn't commit a crime. I don't care how they got there. I don't care if they got there because they committed a crime, because they skipped school, because they got suspended, expelled. Figure out what the problem is and address the underlying problem, and let's work on that. Let's get wraparound services. So we did. So I'm going to put some stats up, and then I'm going to let Jackie talk about where we currently are. As of today, she told me we have 84 diversion kids. Those are kids that actually committed a crime, and we've decided not to send them to court. First, before I turn it over to Jackie, let me tell you why we do that. It turns out if you take a low-risk person and put them in a room with a high-risk person, the high-risk person doesn't get better. The low-risk person gets worse. So we don't want to system involve kids in the justice system. When I took over in 2015, our diversion program existed, but it was run out of the DA's office in the building where we bring a bunch of adult felons in. That's not a good plan. So the first thing I did when I started is I moved them over to Partners and ran our diversion program out of the Partners building, then ultimately moved it over on campus to CMU. So Lighthouse is what we call the program where people did not commit a crime. We just got a referral for services, whether it's from the school district or a teacher, a counselor, Department of Human Services, where else, Jackie? Pediatric offices, right?
Parents.
Yep. So we have 98 Lighthouse cases, 20 from probation accessing services, and the other 78 are just people that didn't commit a crime at all, but we got a referral. And the program that John Marshall set up for us, we currently have 35 CMU students that are mentors. These are students that are part of the social work program, psychology, criminal justice. This is what they want to do for a living. And now they're doing it, getting paid to do it as students, sometimes getting credit. We have one intern from the social work program for a whole year, one intern from the criminal justice program for this semester. We got one next semester coming from psych program. 2 mentors and one of our interns are bilingual. And so these people, CMU, I don't know if you know this, but CMU has the highest percentage of first-generation college students of any public university in Colorado. There's a lot of kids on CMU's campus that actually had similar issues to the kids in Lighthouse and figured out a way to get to college. My favorite story is the first kid we sent through Lighthouse is now a student at CMU, and he is one of our 35 mentors. Okay, Jackie, I'm turning it over to you to tell them a little bit more about what all the programs are.
Okay.
And you need this.
I got both. I need both.
Yeah, this is for the recording.
Okay.
So.
Oops.
There.
Can you hear me? Okay. So when Dan called me, I was not in a good place out at DYS. The system was just not for me, and I ended up getting ulcers. But when he called, I was ready to jump ship. Right? I was. It was that bad. So I was like, yes, I'm in. If we can prevent kids from being incarcerated, that's where I want to be. So he had a vision of being on CMU campus, making sure we got kids services at the lowest level possible, right? 5 years ago, it was me and another half-time person, and now we are up to 8 people working 2 full-time with just our Lighthouse kids. So we have an MOU now with District 51 where we are allowed into 2 schools, Thunder Mountain Elementary and Bookcliff Middle School. And that is where we are working with their attendance team. So when our little kindergartners and first graders and second graders are dropping below that 85% mark of attendance, we're supposed to be getting referrals from them so that we can jump in and figure that out. You guys probably know that a first grader dropping below that 85% mark, it's not a kid issue. It's a family systems issue. And so we're really working to wrap the family with services to try to go under the water, to try to figure out what's causing those issues so these kids stay in their seats at school, stay off of substances, graduate from high school, and stay out of the juvenile justice and child welfare systems. We have about, how many classes do we have? 20 to 25 different classes that we provide for kids. We are right now piloting the first juvenile curriculum for domestic violence because we've seen a huge rise in juvenile female DV offenders. So, and the state of Colorado did not have a curriculum for domestic violence for our young people. So we're piloting that with the Domestic Violence Offender Management Board in hopes that we can help kids across the state get services earlier, learn what relationships should look like. We teach kids and parents about social media, what screen time does to their little brains, what they can access. Tell me if you guys know the average age that a child is accessing pornography. What do you think that age is? Ooh, it's 8. It's 8, which was a shock to me because that's an average, right? And it's not just your regular porn, it's pretty violent and it's pretty, it's aggressive. So those kinds of things we're trying to get to the bottom of to help parents understand what that means for their young people. We are running out of room in our little part of the building at CMU campus. We have our own classroom. We have a room where mentors come in and they can tutor our kids. Tomorrow night is a tutoring night for all of our mentors to bring their kids in. We do peer connection nights to help peers. Mentors bring their mentees in to talk with each other and learn from each other, as well as families to learn how to connect with each other. I guess what else do we do? Jasmine is my right-hand person. Kids come in from, go ahead. Huh? Employee of the year, yes, last year. It was Jasmine. Yep, that's true. We have quite a powerhouse of a team. We recently have been working with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they are giving us hygiene packets, school supplies, backpacks, and we just fed 35 of our Lighthouse families a full turkey dinner, which was super cool. We've never done that before. The cool part about what we can do with diversion in Lighthouse is that it's so flexible. If we see a trend, for example, when we saw a huge increase in theft and vandalism in our city, Jasmine created a program where she works with the city of Grand Junction, law enforcement, several businesses on Main Street, where they have packets of information and they go up and down Main Street looking for vandalism and theft, and they learn the impact on those businesses and the impact on their family. So we're really trying to do a community approach about how their behavior impacts our community and others. Good?
All right, before I finish up with the juvenile diversion stuff, I just want to finalize the part of why we don't go through court on many of them. We send about, Tirsa, your chief of juveniles, about a third that go through court? 2/3 go to diversion? Somewhere thereabouts. Who here has kids? Most of you? Okay. So what happens is you commit a juvenile crime, you go through court, you end up at sentencing about 9 months later. Those of you who have kids, if you punish somebody for something they did 9 months ago, are they making the mental connection between what their punishment is and what their behavior was? No. Diversion, we usually get them in within a week. And since we're not going through the court process, it's you agree you won't go through the court process if you do these things instead, and we get them lined up with services. Okay, so that is our low risk people. We have also found out or figured out through our time that domestic violence is our very, very high risk people, or at least our repeat offenders are our very high risk people. And so for those of you who were here in 2017, when we asked for the public safety tax, our office and the sheriff's office were grossly underfunded and the crime problem was running rampant. We did not have staff to have the response that we wanted to have. Domestic violence is a cycle. And if you catch victims at the right part of that cycle, you can get cooperation. If you don't catch them at the right part, they often are back with the offender, they're asking for the restraining order to be dropped, and they're in very high-risk situations. So we wanted to have a team of highly trained people to look at those cases and assess which ones we wanted to put more resources in and which ones were the low-risk people that we probably needed to get out of the system fairly quickly. So the DVRT development started in 2019 after the public safety tax passed. The idea was to identify cases that appear high risk for rapid recidivism, continued violence, or lethality. We began screening for red flags and created a checklist of that based upon our institutional knowledge and a lot of research around the country. For example, strangulation. A woman who is strangled is 9 times more likely to be killed than a woman who was not strangled. So if you have a domestic violence situation that involves strangulation, the likelihood that that will result in lethality is 9 times higher. So we got a JAG grant in 2022 and started with the domestic violence response team, and I'll tell you what it's comprised of in just a minute. But what do we review in that? We get a pretrial report. Mesa County is probably the furthest along of any of the 64 counties in our pretrial process. We have a pretrial report that tells us our criminal history, something called the CPAT, the Colorado Pretrial Assessment Tool, which looks at stability factors, likelihood that somebody's going to make it to court. Do they make residential payments or own a home? Do they have a phone, cell phone or home phone? Do they have these things that are sort of stability factors that would predict the likelihood that they're going to commit another crime while on bond and show up to court, which are the 2 reasons for bond. So we'll look at that. We'll look at if it's a domestic violence case, we have a DVSI, the domestic violence screening instrument, that also looks at predictors of how dangerous somebody is. And the pretrial report will give us a DVSI score as well. We have a DV investigation form that we've worked, team sport, with the sheriff's office and the police departments to create a standardized form that all of them use to ask the right questions so that we can make lethality assessments and try to get the right bond conditions. If you pay attention to the local newspaper, you'll see oftentimes people get a PR bond with certain pretrial services conditions, or they get a high cash bond, and there's not really anything in between. We've kind of gone away from doing surety bonds in Mesa County because sureties don't really have any incentive to make sure people don't commit crimes. They actually have an incentive for people to commit a crime, because if the person commits a crime and gets arrested again, they're relieved of any responsibility on the bond and they get to keep the premium. And then oftentimes the people come back to them to post another bond. But pretrial supervision as a condition of PR bond. So what we usually do is we try to determine, can we safely manage this person out of custody while they're awaiting trial? Remember, the purpose of bond is not to punish. We punish people in America after they're convicted. Bond is to make sure that we can safely get them to trial and actually get them to show up to trial. So if we can do that through pretrial conditions, maybe it's a GPS ankle monitor, maybe it's drug and alcohol testing, maybe it's calling them to remind them of court, all these various things. But if we decide we can't, we are asking for a high enough cash bond knowing they can't make it. I don't want somebody who's rich, who's dangerous, to get out. And I don't want somebody who doesn't have any money, who's not dangerous, to stay in because the judge sets a $10 bond. If you're setting a $10 bond, you're obviously not very worried about this person. So just give them a PR bond. if they miss court, like the likelihood people are actually fleeing the country to avoid prosecution is pretty small. A lot of people fail to appear for court, but it's because they're irresponsible idiots who don't show up to court, right? They slept through, they got drunk, whatever, they forgot. Pro-social people don't understand this, right? I mean, pro-social people, if any of you had a criminal case pending, you would be so stressed out for a week leading up to it, there's no way you're forgetting it. We have people who literally have 6 cases pending and they're all set on the same day and they forget to go to court. So in any event, we review all of those things. We review the DV investigation form. The victim's perception of future risk is huge. Does the person have access to guns? Were there threats to kill, threatening with a weapon, strangulation? Previous times that this has happened, is this a repeat thing? Did they do this with children in the room present? These are all high-risk factors. We also monitor jail phone calls to see about protection order violations. Are there efforts to tamper with witnesses? All these things can get you into the domestic violence response team review process. Okay, so what happens there? They meet once a week. Once a case has been reviewed by the team, recommendations are made, and the team has on it, there's a coordinator that makes sure everything's happening. There's a DV investigator that's specifically just assigned to the DV response team cases. There is a prosecutor whose sole job is to handle the domestic violence response team cases, so anything that goes, so she might get overloaded, or depending on her situation, she might be second chair on them, but she will have the higher training to make sure everything happens. So we can add charges. Sometimes we just add charges based on a review. Maybe we can turn something into a stalking case because we learn other things. So typically what happens is law enforcement will get called out on a dispatch and they will know about the one case that they are dealing with that day. But they all come into our office. They all filter into our office. So we know about the other ones. We know about the protection order violations. We know what happened 3 years ago. We know what happened 10 years ago. And so we can sort of use this information and figure out, is this a stalking situation? Do we have escalation of behavior? In addition to potential charges, there might be follow-up investigation. I mentioned this is a cyclical thing. It's not uncommon when we have somebody get arrested for a second crime, maybe a protection order violation or a second assault, that the victim is now cooperative again for a few days. So we might take that opportunity to re-interview them about the other case, the earlier case, to make sure that we gather additional evidence. Maybe there's something we missed before. Maybe there was something that happened since then that's now good evidence of that. There's interviews, the referrals for forensic interviews. Oftentimes, patrol officers don't have the ability to interview the kids. We try to interview kids at the Western Slope Center for Children in a forensic interview process where it's on video, where it's this sort of very highly trained forensic interviews that we use for our sex assault on child cases. We also want to use those on domestic violence cases. Recovery of surveillance videos, that usually has to happen pretty fast, and patrol officers usually don't have the time to do that, but our DA investigators do. And then additional services, our victim services staff. When I took over as DA, we had 3 people in our victim services unit. We now have 13. This was as a result of the public safety tax. We were doing a terrible job of servicing victims. Our system is so offender-centric that we were only focused on what we had to do and not really focused on making sure people knew about victims' compensation, making sure people knew about these other services that they can access. And then all these cases are tracked in a database. One of the things that we learned from tracking them in the database is in 2024, we had 4 officer-involved shootings. Of the 4 officer-involved shootings, 3 of those people involved in the shooting had been reviewed by our domestic violence response team. So what do we want to do with this information? We now have Division of Criminal Justice is giving us some grant money to sort of study what is it that we want to use this information for. Should we be telling law enforcement, this is the cases we're reviewing. If you get called out on one of these names, be very careful. These are the people that are more high risk and more likely to end up in a shooting with you. Okay, so what does the coordinator do? Coordinator is well-trained, specializes in identifying the high-risk cases. With the specialized approach, there's immediate action taken on all DV cases through investigation and case review, increase in services to domestic violence victims in a more timely fashion. This proactive approach helps strengthen the criminal case, create a more prosecutable case, identify cases that are undercharged or need further investigation. Sometimes during that critical time where we get somebody back on a new offense, we'll learn about other things that weren't even reported, and we may be able to charge additional crimes and uncharged conduct. The DA DV investigator will conduct additional interviews and follow up on cases that might be stalking and not charged as such, be able to recover evidence. Strangulation, for example, the critical time to collect evidence of strangulation is about 4 days after the strangulation. That's when it's going to start showing up visually. And so we're in the process of creating a new strangulation protocol, which we're rolling out, I want to say the end of February. It's going live for all the agencies, but it involves St. Mary's Hospital, Community Hospital, 911, the fire department, and paramedics, as well as all of our law enforcement agencies came together to put this strangulation protocol together. That was run by our Domestic Violence Response Team coordinator. Our DV investigator will also obtain medical releases. Again, something that has to happen at that critical time. If you catch the victim at the wrong time, she might revoke the medical releases and we won't have the medical evidence to prove up the case. So if we can get the medical release and collect the records during that critical time, we'll have access to that information. Obtain 404B evidence. That's 404B is a rule of evidence that says if you committed a crime earlier, you can't use that crime to say that you're more likely to have committed this crime. There are exceptions to that rule, and there's a statute that says in domestic violence cases, the court should presume that prior domestic violence is relevant to show somebody's intent, their motive, things like that. And so we might be collecting evidence of other crimes that we're going to be able to present at the trial coming up. We also have a DV victim specialist. We call them victim specialists. Most offices call them victim advocates. There's a reason we don't call them advocates, and that is because oftentimes victims, especially in domestic violence cases, will ask for the case to be dismissed, and they'll get mad at the victim specialist for not advocating for dismissal. So we didn't want to confuse them to think that they're going to be advocating for whatever position the victim has. Oftentimes we believe that it's in the interest of justice and that we still need to pursue the case even if the victim has decided that they don't want us to. They might be saying that because they feel safer if they've told the offender they did that. There might be lots of reasons why they decide that. Some of them might be legitimate and some of them might be just, things that we're going to disregard and say, I'm sorry, remember, it's okay to tell them it was us that decided to prosecute this, not you. But in any event, we call them specialists. They're dedicated to the high-risk cases. We have them for all of our victim cases, but we have a DVRT victim specialist specifically for those cases, building relationships, making sure they have safety plans, making sure they're aware of all of the services available that can pay for therapy, pay for all sorts of things. And then there's the lawyer that's assigned to it as well. And so all of these, so Jackie mentioned that we started off with 2 people in her diversion program, and then you're up to now 8 total. The additional 6, every single one of them is grant funded, not county dollars, not your tax dollars. And when I say grant funded, we actually have a family in town that funds one of the positions, just believes in the program. For DVRT, all of those positions for DVRT are also grant funded. So understands the laws, if there's additional work that needs to be done, helps mentor the younger lawyers in how to handle the cases, maybe do the trial with them. So here's my favorite part of all of this. I'm a data guy. So in 2017, we passed the public safety tax. January 1st of 2018 was the first taxable sale that funded it. And here is the crime rate. As you see in 2016 and 17, it's going up to 18. When we finally started getting money, I think we actually collected and got remitted back to us some money in like March or April of 2018. And then of course we have to start looking for people to hire to fill these positions. And then of course, this is kind of the anomaly during the pandemic. The numbers are much lower, but that wasn't because we were doing an amazing job. It was because the cops were directed, do not insert yourself into anything voluntarily. If you get a 911 call, take it. But our felony filings went way down just because stuff was not getting referred up to our office. And but that was a challenging time. But you can see it's pretty steadily dropped. I ran this number this morning. I projected based upon December 1st's numbers, and I looked to see whether December was higher or lower in prior years. And based upon what we are today, I'm projecting at the end of 2025, we'll hit 1,345 felonies. This is the highest number it's ever been since 2005 when I started tracking this. It actually went down around 2009 when the market fell out, the bottom fell out of the market, and law enforcement had to lay off about a third of their workforce. Again, that wasn't because we were doing a good job. It went way down because we weren't solving cases. But our solve rate, the sheriff's office and police department's solve rate, is significantly higher than anything on the Front Range. Significantly higher. So that is an overview of some of our lowest risk people and some of our highest risk people. We do also have a lot of other cool programs. Tirsa, I mentioned, is the chief over the drug unit. One program that we have that's also grant funded is our highway interdiction stuff. We get a lot of cases where it's drugs going from LA to Chicago or something like that that are really not Mesa County's problem. We have a shared responsibility to deal with the drug problem, but I don't think our prosecutors actually mind handling Heidi. Do you guys mind handling highway interdiction cases? No, they like it because you get to wheel in 60 kilos of meth on a cart in front of the jury, and it's a 2-witness case with all professional witnesses. You got the cop who pulled the car over and the drug tester, and so they love doing those trials. But at the end of that, those people get really long sentences, like 16 years in the Department of Corrections, that are costing you as taxpayers $55,000 a year for somebody who was driving drugs from LA to Chicago and happened to be in Mesa County for 45 minutes on I-70. So this grant program that I got through HIDA's, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, I said, this is not fair. We want to keep prosecuting them, but I have a partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office where we get to file those in federal court, and they serve their time in federal prison, so it's a shared cost across the country, not just falling on Colorado. So anyway, we have a bunch of other programs. Those are some of the more interesting ones, but I'm happy to take questions. So you've met Tirsa. Heidi Bauer is one of my senior trial deputies. Jasmine, raise your hand. Jasmine is one of our diversion coordinators, and she was, of the 89 employees of our office, she was the employee of the year last year. Okay, questions?
There's been concern from a lot of people about the changing legislation, reducing the felony levels of petty crimes. Does that have something to do with the reduced felony filings?
So that happened, that went into effect in March of 2020. So all of the change would have occurred in 2020. In 2021, compared to these numbers, this has all been on the same system. So essentially what occurred was the legislature decided that drug possession of methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl, all those things that we're pretty scared of, should all be a misdemeanor. It's a felony if it's a higher quantity or it's a fourth offense. And so it's been a problem. There's no question it's been a problem, but we've been able to wrap our arms around that problem. We are pretty good at dealing with the drug addiction side of it. We run wiretaps and we do all sorts of stuff on the enforcement side of it as well. But if you're going to keep having people who are addicts, they're going to find a way to get drugs, and they're going to continue to break into your cars and do those other things. So it certainly was a problem initially, and we've been able to figure out how to deal with it and make sure that those other crimes, the residential burglaries, the car break-ins, all those other things, which is what tends to be the collateral consequence of the drug problem, make sure that we were reducing the chance that those happen. Yes.
How does the DA's office get feedback from constituents about performance?
Mostly things like this. So I would say the two main ways that we get feedback are, I try to speak to as many of these things as possible. I talk to the Lions clubs, and there's a group called New Dimensions that's kind of more retiree people. And so I do these presentations, and at the end of it, I ask them, like, I'm elected to be your lawyer. Lawyers have clients, and clients tell their lawyer what to do. So I want to know if I'm doing what you want me to do. This is how what I just presented, this is how we're spending our time. And we try to spend as much time as possible on the high-risk people and to get the low-risk people out as quickly as possible. The other way that we do it is we talk to jurors afterwards.
Is there any kind of formal complaint system or contact that somebody that hasn't attended one of these or has a specific issue could reach out about?
Not really. We have all of our emails are online. If you go on our website, you can get a hold of the prosecutor that handled your case. We do a survey, actually, an exit survey on all victims' rights cases. Anything that has victims under the Victims' Rights Amendment, we actually have them do an exit survey to see how they felt it was, but it's more people who were involved in a case, not just general citizens.
Do you handle red flag issues?
When you say, so the question was, do we have red flag issues? Red flag was a law that was passed that allows people, if they are aware of somebody having mental health issues or other reasons why they shouldn't have a gun, then a citizen can bring an action to try to get that gun taken away from them. It's pretty actually difficult to have a citizen do it. They can enlist law enforcement, and each of the law enforcement agencies was responsible to come up with a policy. I'm technically a law enforcement agency, but my policy is we don't have the trained personnel. We have some DA investigators, but we don't have like patrol officers and like the sheriff's office does and the police department does. So our policy is to refer it to the appropriate municipality or county. But I think we've only had 5 of them since it's passed. And I'm not aware of any of them being ones that were a problem, like that they shouldn't happen. I was very concerned because one of the people who's eligible to bring a red flag action and take somebody's guns away from them is a spouse. So you could have a domestic violence abuser who's taking the gun that the victim bought to protect herself away from her. So I was worried about things like that, but I think the courts have caught those and stopped them pretty well. The only ones that have gone through seem to have been a good idea. What I've advised law enforcement is that's actually a civil process. So I can't really give them good advice on what to do. But usually if there is a red flag issue, there has been a crime committed. So, right, I mean, there's somebody pointing a gun at somebody, threatening somebody, making threats about something. Usually there's a crime associated with it. If we can go through that crime and just get a general restraining order prohibiting weapons while the case is pending or as a condition of probation after the case is pending, we found that to be a much more effective way to kind of monitor it because we'll have probation officers, we'll have regular court supervision. So for any of the things we were worried about with red flag, we're going to have ongoing contact with that defendant, with the courts, and with monitoring. Yes, ma'am.
Just to piggyback off of that, with red flag issues, also you could be monitoring the mental health of someone.
Yeah.
And once they're compliant and were deemed appropriate, the red flag could be in effect or taken back.
Yes, and if through the criminal justice system, oftentimes we'll have a probation officer or somebody else monitoring the mental health issues, and then we can go back to court and address the ongoing restraining order through that mechanism.
So the protection orders, would you say that there's a high percentage of those that are violated?
A high percentage of protection orders that are violated? I could run a report. So we have a data dashboard on our website. I could run a report to see how many protection orders that are violated that are reported. Oftentimes protection orders are violated and we don't know about it. Protection orders can have conditions like no drugs or alcohol, no contact with a certain person, no contact with a certain address. We don't know if that stuff happens and doesn't get reported. We do, I would say, I don't know which of the two of you is in county court more recently than me. I would say we probably have 400 or 500 protection order violation charges filed every year. Only a small percentage of those are contact with a person. Oftentimes it's you're not supposed to be drinking because when you got arrested for domestic violence, you were drunk and they test positive. And so we'll end up with a lot of those. But yeah, I would say a piece of paper and a judge saying don't do this is not the most effective way to curb behavior. Anything else?
Dan Rubenstein, thank you for taking my question. In regards to the slide that you have up there right now, do you have another one that breaks down, for example, 2025, what those 1,345 filings are so that we know what the trends have been since 2016?
I don't have a slide for that. Our data dashboard will do that. So if you want to email me, contact me, I'm happy to run whatever report you want and send you a screenshot